Hi, I'm back for part 2. This is gonna be What If Deku Had All Fiction. Let's get back into it, shall we? So last time I left off, Deku was getting cleaned up by the people at the orphanage. After he's done taking a shower and being bandaged, the people at the orphanage ask him for his quirk. But Deku says, I haven't got my quirk evaluated yet. So they take him to a quirk doctor. And when they get there, Deku does a variety of tests. And when the test results come back, Deku is found out to be, well, quirkless. And they all look at him like he's a dirty bastard, which he is, because his father's a deadbeat. But once they find this out, they take Deku back to the orphanage, where they beat the absolute shit out of him just for being quirkless. And Deku is thinking to himself, why me? I've been through 2 lifetimes of torture. First, my mom dies. Damn, man beats the absolute fuck out of me. Now this. Wham, bitch. You're gonna go through a lot more than this. So once they're done beating Deku, they get all the other kids, and they all gang stump his shit. And I'm not gonna take it easy on him. I'm gonna really let him have it. Because I want him to be all the way fucked up. No mentality whatsoever. So once they're done beating the hell out of Deku, he's bloodied again. And they don't even bother to give him a towel. He just lies there in a pool of blood until a woman comes by and she sees Deku's body and she says, I'd like a new punching bag. And this woman would happen to be Inko. Inko would say, I'd like to adopt that boy. And Deku, hearing this, he would get a glimmer of hope, but he would be blacked out. When Deku wakes up, he'd be in a hospital, surrounded by 4 disgusted faces. His mother, Inko. His new father, All Might. His sister, Izumi. And his other sister, Inami. They all look at Deku like he's some type of disgusting person. Like he should be dead. Well, not Inami, because I have plans for her. But the rest of them do. They all look at Deku like he's in a disgrace, a disgusting human being, a mistake, in fact. And when he goes to utter a word, All Might says, shut up, you damn quirkless brat. If you speak one word, I'll punch you so hard your head'll come off. And Deku says, what? And they all look at him, and they start laughing. Look, the quirkless boy, he's shook. And so, after the doctors come in, and they patch Deku up, they let him go. And Deku is taken to their home, where he is shown to his room and chained up. And Deku says, I'm going through it again. I'm gonna keep going through this over and over and over again. And once Deku's chained up, Inko would come in with a knife, and she would slice Deku's arm, leaving a wide open gash. And she would start cutting at the meat. All of Deku's muscle would be completely torn off. And Deku would scream out in pain, but Inko would just be laughing. Damn quirkless brat. I literally only adopted you just to do this. By the way, we are gonna send you to school And you bet not tell anybody about this, or we'll kill you. And she continues to torture Deku, along with All Might. Once he walks in, he starts punching Deku, and punching, 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 until, boom, Deku's passed out. Once he's passed out, he can't really see anything. He's in a dark place, but he sees a being of darkness. And this being says, wait until your high school days. Train and get as smart as you can, because my power will destroy your body. Or it'll try to. Unless you overcome it, that is. And Deku wakes up. And he says, where am I? I'm, I'm still here. And Inko would unchain him and say, it's time for school, damn it. Get up. And Deku would say, okay, Inko. And he would get up in his bloody clothes and go to school. When Deku went in front of the class, he looks at all of them with death in his eyes. And he says, my name is Izuku. I am what is called a minus or a loser. Whichever one would do. And all of them start laughing, including the teacher. They're all like, we already knew this, kid. Your sister, she told us so much about you. And Izumi would flick Deku off and stick her tongue out at him. And at this time, we'll say Deku is 6. So we'll say Deku has been beaten the shit out of for 2 years. Why not? And so, once he goes to sit down, he gets stung a little bit. Deku stands up and he looks at his chair and he sees thumbnails or tacks, whichever one you want to call them, really. And he says, oh, who did this? And he would look over and see Bakugo smiling. And Bakugo would pass him a note that says, I'm gonna beat the ever-living shit out of you, kid. And so, once school is over, Deku would try to walk home as fast as he could. But Bakugo and Izumi would catch up. And Izumi, we'll say she has an earth quirk. She bends the concrete to hold Deku down. And she'd say, alright, Bakugo, we're gonna beat the shit out of him. And Bakugo says, that's the plan. And so Bakugo starts wailing on Deku with explosive punches. And he would break Deku's jaw with his third punch. And Izumi would be kicking Deku in the ribs and stomping on his stomach. And she would use the concrete to break Deku's leg. And this would keep going for 2 hours. And Deku would get up. He would wiggle his way out of the concrete, that is. And he'd punch Izumi in the face. And Izumi would start to cry. And she would run home. And Bakugo says, well, you're screwed now, kid. And he would continue to beat the ever-living fuck out of him until Deku is passed out. Deku isn't gonna have an easy life, as y'all can see. So, once Deku wakes up, he sees Inko, and Deku has something around his neck, and it has spikes in it. And she says, if you say one word, you'll die. And she shocks Deku, and Deku says, what are you doing? please stop. And they all look at Deku and they say, You punched Izumi for no reason. And Deku says, She beat me. She beat the hell out of me. Look at my body. Look at the condition I'm in. And they would say, You liar. And Inko would continue to shock Deku. And he'd scream out in pain. And Inami would be seeing this from a corner. And she'd start crying and she'd say, Why are they doing this to him? He could be such a nice boy. Look at him. He looks so innocent. He won't be for long though. But once he basically gets tortured for a long while, they eventually let up and they give him a piece of rotten bread to eat. And Deku would crawl over to it and grab it. But he would see Inami at his back basically, because that's what he's laying on. And he'd say, Are you here to torture me too? And Izumi would put down a plate of food and some water. And Deku would immediately start eating, because he's been starved for months. And Inami would say, Are you okay? And Deku says, No, of course not. Look at my body. I can barely even speak right now. And he tries to stand up, but he collapses, and Inami catches him. Hold on, y'all. I'll get a picture of this bitch so you can see her. Okay, here's your picture of the bitch. So, Inami would look exactly like this. And she would try to patch Deku up, but Deku would smack her hand away, and he would say, You're a part of this wretched family. You're gonna try to kill me, torture me, even betray me. Stay away. And he would back up and take the plate of food with him. And Inami would think to herself, I guess I'll have to earn his trust. And she would leave. We're gonna have a time skip. Let's see, Deku is 6 years old. We're gonna have a time skip of 8 years. Deku is now 14, and he's been training his ass off every day. After he would get tortured, he would eat and he would train. He would try to read a little bit with any book he could get his hands on. And he would do push-ups, sit-ups, and when he was done in school, he would run a mile every day. And fuck her, Inami, she'd provide him with food, and Deku would start to open up to her, and they'd happen to become good friends. But when they get into, high school, on the last day of middle school, Deku would say, Inami, what's up? But she would seem to ignore him. And Deku would be like, well, that's kind of odd. And he'd take his seat. When the teacher would come in, he'd throw the papers in the air. And he'd say, well, there's no point in asking you what you guys want to be, because I know you all want to be heroes. And they all scream and say, yeah, of course we do. We all want to be just like All Might. And Izumi and Bakugo say, don't lump us in with these damn losers, including that damn Deku. And the teacher would say, speaking of Deku, he wants to go to UA. And everybody in the classroom would laugh. And Deku would look over at Inami, and she wouldn't laugh. She wouldn't even try to stand up for Deku like she usually does. She'd just look at him with a blank face, and then she'd look away. And Deku would be like, what's wrong? What did I do? And so, once basically school is done, Deku would run over to Inami, and and Inami would slap the shit out of him. And she'd say, how could you? How could you do that? You damn pervert. And Izuku would say, what are you talking about? And she'd say, this. And she'd hold up a camera. And she'd say, how could you place this in my room? What were you thinking to do with this? And Deku would say, I'd never do that. And she'd say, my mom showed it to me. You damn idiot. You thought you would get away with it too, didn't you? And Deku would say, Inami, you know I'm not like that. What are you talking about? And she'd walk away. And Deku would feel his heart sinking. And sinking even more. And when his heart's done sinking, Deku, he'd give up all hope. And he'd go home. Just to be beaten and kicked and tortured all over again. But this time, Inami's looking. And she's laughing at him. And so, over the 10 months training period, oh no, fuck that. We're not even gonna get into that yet. We're gonna do the UA exam. Deku goes to the exam. And he looks around. Deku sees a brown-haired girl walking towards him. And he'd back up and walk away just because he doesn't want to have any conflict with anybody. And the brown-haired girl would happen to be Uraraka. But she'd also be accompanied by a girl named Momo. And they'd be like, where's he going? Why'd he look like that? He just wanted to say hi. And Deku would say, wow, that was close. And so I'm going to skip over this, but Deku, he aced the written exam. And he got a bunch of rescue points, which led him to getting into Class 1A. And everybody, All Might, Izumi, Inami, and Inko, they would all be shocked at this. And they'd be like, how the hell did they let a quirkless loser like him get into Class 1A, the hero course? And Inko would file a complaint to Nezu, but Nezu wouldn't hear it. He'd say, if the boy did that well, he deserves to be a hero. And Inko would storm out of the principal's office, pissed off. And so, the first day of school, Deku walks in the classroom. And he sees the same two girls walk towards him. And they'd say, hi, our names are Uraraka and Momo. Nice to meet you. And Deku says, hi, my name's Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you too. And he says, what do you want? And they'd say, well, you're kinda cute. And Deku would say, cute? What are you talking about? And they'd look at him and be like, yeah, you're cute. We kinda wanted to take you out. And Deku, not knowing about love or true happiness, would accept this. But they were put up to this by none other than Inami. She wants to break Deku, slowly and painfully. But that won't come into play yet. So, They go on a little date, and they get to know each other pretty well. Deku is enjoying himself, and he actually believes that the girls like him. And so he starts to develop feelings. And fast forward the fucking 10 months training period. Well, nah, fuck that. I've already skipped over that, haven't I? Because first day of school. Nah, we'll say the 10 month training period happens after the first day of school. Why not? Why not? This is my what if after all. So the first day of school is basically to get to know everybody. And after that begins the 10-month training period. And this time, Deku has done more training than he's ever done, especially mental training. Deku has been meditating. Once he gets tortured, he can barely feel it because he's always in his mindscape training himself. And Deku would be able to go into his mindscape at will because of the immense amounts of pain he's felt. And in all of this time, Deku has felt something in him. And this thing, it would say, "Not yet. I know I said 2 years, but you're gonna go through something much more painful. I've been waiting for that to happen." And Deku says, "What are you talking about?" And the black figure would say, "Don't worry about it. Just know you'll get my power after that." And he'd disappear. And so Deku, during the 10 months training period, has been hanging out with Uraraka and Momo. And they've started to bond together. And after the 10 months training period, they've become the best of friends. So he thinks. And so, once they go to school the next day, well, after the training period, Deku goes to sit with Momo and Uraraka. But they look at him and are like, "What are you doing here, you damn quirkless loser?" And Deku says, "Wait, what? What are you talking about? I thought we were friends." "No. You, you really thought we would be friends with you?" And Deku says, "Well, yeah. You guys were nice to me over the 10 months. And they'd both laugh. Inami put us up to that. She just wanted us to break your little fragile heart." And Deku would look down at the ground. And he'd go to the seat at the back of the classroom. And in his mind, the dark figure would appear. And he'd say, "You're ready." And Deku would feel a course of blood throughout his veins. But this blood wouldn't be any type of regular blood. Oh no. This blood is pure darkness, pure black blood. And Deku would start screaming in pain and agony. And he'd be taken to the infirmary. And Recovery Girl would try to kiss him all that she could. Wow. That sounds like Recovery Girl is kind of a pedophile. But we won't get into that. But she starts kissing on him just to try to heal him. But this doesn't work. Deku is screaming and screaming and screaming until, well, it all stops. Everything stops. And Deku transforms into this, a pure being of darkness. And he'd say, "What is this?" And the darkness being would say, "This is your darkness form. Remember, I said I'd give you all of my powers. That means you'll get my forms too." And Deku would say, "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" And the darkness form would say, "I already explained it. You will have the power of all fiction, the ability to neglect or negate all aspects of reality. And you'll have these powers called bookmakers. They're basically huge nails that you can shoot from any part of your body and the ground. You can make them appear from anywhere, basically. And if you stab somebody, well, they'll be downgraded to your level. Well, the level you are when you got tortured, that is. And Deku says, "Oh, that's nice." And the darkness figure says, "Don't be beat up. Those girls weren't ever going to be your friends. You will have no friends at all. Remember that." And he disappears, and Deku wakes up. And he's out of his darkness form. But Recovery Girl would say, "What the hell was that?" And Deku would say, "I guess it's my quirk." And he would go back to class. Aizawa would be waiting for him. And he would say, "Problem, child. Put this on. We're going to be going outside to do a quirk evaluation test. I know you don't have a quirk, but do your best." But Deku says, I do." And Aizawa would say, "What?" And Izuku would say, "I have a quirk now." And he would go outside. And Bakugo, being the first one to get, well, the highest points in the exam, would say, "I'm going to show you damn losers how to really do this." And he throws the ball first without his quirk. And he gets, we'll say, 100 meters. Then he throws the ball with his quirk. And he gets fucking 700 meters. Then is Izumi and Inami. And they both get 600 meters. Why not? And then everybody else goes until it's Deku's turn. And Aizawa says, "Well, Deku, or Izuku, show me your new quirk." And Deku would say, "Okay, Bookmaker." And a small nail would go into the ball. And he would throw the ball as far as he could. And he'd start to control the nail. And Deku would say, "Wait, what is this?" And the darkness form says, "I told you, you can control your bookmakers." And so Deku basically just controls it to go as far as possible. And we'll say he gets infinity, because it doesn't stop unless he doesn't want to control it anymore. So Deku basically aces this exam, or the quirk assessment. And everybody's looking at him like, wasn't he supposed to be quirkless? And Bakugo, Inami, and Izumi would say, "Were you hiding this from us?" And they would go to beat him. But Deku, oh Deku, he wouldn't have this. He'd look at them and he'd say, "Me? I would never hide this. Go ahead, beat the hell out of me. Beat me all you want. But I have something for you." And so once they're basically done beating the absolute fuck out of Deku, Deku looks at them and he says, "Bookmaker." And a huge nail, well, 3 huge nails, come out of the ground. And they completely stab all 3 of them shit. And they're immediately feeling immense amounts of pain. And they'd be like, "What did you do?" And Deku says, "I transferred all my pain. All of it. All of it. Right over to you guys. And now you guys can suffer. You can feel what you've been doing to me all of my life." And Deku would get another nail. And he would go over to Bakugo. And he'd say, "Die." and he throws the nail through Bakugo's throat. And Bakugo starts choking on blood more and more and more until he starts regurgitating and it all comes out. And he's throwing up organs. And ew, it's disgusting. And basically, he dies because he chokes on his own blood. And then Deku says, Inami, Izumi, I have something for you too. I'll do to you what my mother felt. And so Deku takes them somewhere private. And he says, I'm going to rape you guys to death. And he starts undressing the both of them. And they're both paralyzed. They don't understand why they can't move. And Deku says, well, I neglected the part of reality to make you guys move. So, you'll pretty much be paralyzed. And they're like, what? Please, we didn't mean this. But oh no, it's too late. You guys will die. But I at least should get some pleasure out of it. And so Deku, he first undresses Inami. And then he undresses Izumi. And he says, Inami, I'll start with you. And Deku summons a nail. And he shoves it in her vagina. And he says, wow, does that hurt? And she starts screaming. And Deku says, scream, scream, scream some more. And he shoves 2 nails in her vagina. And then he pulls all 3 of them out. And then he puts them in. And he keeps doing this motion over and over again. Until, well, her vagina is a bloody wreck. And she's begging him to stop. And Izumi is looking at this. And she's in horror. Because her poor little sister, she's getting taken advantage of. And she can do nothing to stop it. And Deku says, I wonder how your vagina feels. I kinda wanna feel it. And so he takes out his penis. And he puts it on Inami. And he starts stroking and stroking and stroking until, boom, he comes all over her. And then he pulls it out. And he puts it in her mouth. And he says, you're gonna have my kids. Oh wait, you're gonna die. And he starts stroking it in her mouth. More and more. Izumi is gargling. And she's moaning. And she's like, oh, Izuku, please stop. But, well, he doesn't. And he shoves it to the back of her throat. And he grabs her nose. And he holds it. And Deku does this for 10 minutes. And she's unable to breathe because, well, my nigga got the 25-meter defeater. Jesus Christ. So, well, she got a long dick down her throat. And she's basically regurgitating on it. And she's like, please stop. And Deku would say, time for you to die. And he'd get another one of his bookmakers. And he'd shove it through her throat. Then he'd look at Izumi. And he'd say, there's no need to rape you. I'll just torture you instead. And so he summons a bookmaker. And he grabs the end of the nail. And he cuts Izumi's stomach open. And she screams out in pain. And he'd grab one of her organs. And he'd pull it out. And he'd shove it down her throat. And he'd say, swallow it. And she'd swallow it. And it'd go right back into her stomach. But he'd do it over and over and over again until, well, her organ busts. And he'd do this with all of her organs. But then he'd say, well, this isn't enough, is it? And so he'd look at her asshole and say, I think a nail would be able to fit in there. And Izumi would say, no, no, please don't, please don't. But Izuku doesn't care. He puts one in her, and he shoves it as deep as he can. And it goes all the way in, and it comes out her mouth with all of her organs on the end of it. And he'd say, well, that's your life. And he'd say, looks like I'm done here. And he would get both of their bodies, and he'd drag them back to his home. He'd kick in the door, and he'd say, Mom, Dad, I'm home. And he'd throw Izumi and Inami's bodies on the ground. And Inko and All Might would come running in. And they would see the dead, mangled, raped bodies of their daughters. And they'd be in horror and disgusted, and they'd say, Izuku, what the hell did you do? And he'd say, I killed your daughters. That's what. And All Might would rush at Deku, and he would punch him in the stomach. But Deku would say, And he would bend reality so that All Might could feel the punch. And All Might ends up accepting all of the pain that he just put on Deku. And he'd say, what the hell did you do? And he'd say, I have a quirk. My quirk is called All Fiction. But I have another one called Bookmaker. But I won't bother to explain them. All I'll tell you is, I can bend reality. And he'd walk over to All Might, and he'd grab him by the throat, and he'd summon a bookmaker, and stab him in the chest 5 times. And then he'd say, die. And he would summon another bookmaker, and he would shove it through All Might's throat. And All Might, he'd be so-called dead. And he'd just be laying there, unconscious. But Izuku thinks he's dead. Then he walks over to Inko. And he looks at Inko, and he grabs her. And he says, you're pretty cute, Mom. I think I'll rape you first. And so, because I don't really want to go into details, I'll say he'll just shove a nail in every part of her body, including all of her holes. As such, her vagina, her asshole, her eye holes, and both of her nostrils. He even shoves a huge one down her throat. And he'd say, well, that's not enough. And so he'd shove 2 big nails down her fucking throat. And he'd say, damn, your throat can take a lot. I've already put 3 nails in there. Well, I'm done with you. Think I'll kill you now. And he summons 2 nails and he shoves them in their ears. And they would puncture Inko's brain. And she'd die. And then Deku would walk out. But before he left, he'd grab a phone. And he called the cops and said, a pro hero and his family have been killed. Please come, hurry. I think it's All Might. And he would laugh under his breath. And the police would say, we're on our way. What the hell? All Might's been beaten? And they rush, and they rush to the apartment. But at this time, Deku's already gone. And he says, I'll rid this world of all sinners until there's nothing left but minuses. But I'm gonna leave it off here because I'm a demonic fuck. Bye.